I just noticed come up in my feed that the Honorable Justice Ruth Ginsburg transitioned. Of course, she is the Supreme Court. She was appointed to the Supreme Court in 1993 by President Bill Clinton. And it's a troubling day because we know that that particular um, seat is filled by people who are appointed by the president or the sitting president. So we know now that that we're getting ready to have another hurdle. But I want to read something, if I can find it. I want to read something she said. Let me see if I can find it here. She said, just days before she died, she said, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. That's a statement that she made to her granddaughter, Clara Sparrow. My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. I don't know how critical um, you feel about politics or how deeply you engage in politics, but very recently um, I've been working on something that is directly connected to politics, and it made me pay attention more than I've ever paid attention before. And of course, I am around a number of theological figures and social figures, community figures that have always been involved, but never felt directly connected to it, and never really felt like it was my responsibility to pay attention to jurisprudence. However, with the death of this particular justice, I understand that the critical nature of whoever her replacement may be. It may be somebody in there who hates black people. It may be somebody that they put in there who can't stand um, people from the LGBTQ community, or people who might be somebody who um, promotes capitalism above health, or it may be somebody who doesn't value the black life of your son or your daughter. And when cases come up before them, they'll be in that office longer than the president that appointed them will be in their office. Um, the challenge that we face before us is, again, not just the executive branch, not just the executive branch, and critically, yes, to the executive branch, because the executive branch chooses a lot of times or influences what goes on with the other branches. But we have something in this country called checks and balances. And when checks and balances are properly in place, and when people are heard properly, um, then we get balanced outcomes. But with sounds of Russian meddling in votes, and with sounds of um, literally people who have a racist remarks and agenda, ignore the truth, lie to us blatantly, cause us to endure the affliction of hearing leadership devaluing elements and dimensions of the society, or promoting the health and welfare of red states over blue states, people who can't even be bipartisan in an executive space where they are supposed to be leaders in the entire uh, livelihood or life space of the country. We have to not only pray with our words to God, we must pray with our ballots. We must pray with our feet. We must pray in matters of justice, and we must pray with our dollar. Um, where we spend our money, how we spend our money, who we donate to, the campaigns that we engage in, the people that we undergird, result in decisions that are made. There is no way to disconnect the work of social justice from the work of economic justice, and of course, the decisions that come from the Supreme Court are decisions like Brown versus the Board of Education. There are decisions that are so critical in the life of these African descendants of enslaved um, Africans. This is critical um, for us to be active and involved. And of course, um, I've said it, I've written in books, I've preached about it, I've taught about it, traveled, got in trouble for it. Too black, too much politics, too much of that. Just say this, just say that, just preach this, just preach that, just teach this, just teach that, just you're doing too much, that's too much, why are you doing all of that? I've had all of that said. I've had all of that come before me. But I do believe that in weathering the storm of people's public opinion of a private conviction, that I've come into a space of purpose and clarity here in 2020 with 200,000 deaths. I've come into a space of clarity that people who believe that you are before your time are really profoundly ignoring the prophetic assignment upon your life. And some of you have innovation, ideas, thoughts, warning, conjecture for the future that some people around you may not receive. You may not be received by everybody around you, but there are going to be decisions made in the future based on what you assert in your convictions as your convictions now. And so you must be profoundly and prophetically convinced of your assignment in this generation. Because if you're not, your one vote or your one inclusion in policy making, or you raising your child to be a policymaker, or putting them on the track of justice, or putting them in the pathway of jurisprudence, or putting them in the pathway of bioethics, or putting them in the pathway of things that are not so popular amongst certain cultures, it will be critical to the future of this country. Yes, we have been through what we've been through, but now the doors are open for us to affect change. The doors are open for us to do things that we've never done before. And so we need to raise up not only doctors, but we need to raise up bioethicists that take into consideration the ethics of what pharmaceutical companies do, that lobby for the work and the welfare and the really the value of life, and whether what we're putting in our bodies is ethical, whether the vaccine will be ethical, whether what they're going to put in there, has it been properly put through the channels, and has it been examined to be safe. I don't care what kind of rhetoric we hear. Are we in a space in this country where we are raising up our next generations to see to it that we're represented in spaces where we're not even considered? And I pray that with these losses that have gone on in 2020, with these great and grand losses, with these craters. A word came to me yesterday, and I meant to post it, but I didn't, but it's coming back to me now. We are a broken people, and we are trying to fill the craters of our brokenness with aesthetics. We are a broken people. This country is breaking literally before our eyes, and we're trying to fill the gaps or the craters of the cracks with aesthetics. It's time for some real healing, some real mending, and some real wholeness to come and occur, because we're not in the space where we can afford to pretend like, or we can afford to act like, or we can afford to play the role like. We have to make real decisions. We have to make real choices. We have to make a real commitment to leadership, not just in the public space and voting in leadership, but we have to make real decisions of leadership when it concerns our parenting. God has the children at home with you for a reason. There may be something that they may see and you may see at the same time. And your word may be the prophetic word that guides them to their next place, that guides them to become eligible to become a Supreme Court justice, that guides them to become a president, that guides them to become attorney general. We have heard from Attorney General Barr today, and we have heard Barr compare the people being asked to stay at home in certain states. We've heard him compare that to slavery. We have heard the demeaning words of leadership, demean the value of Black life and Black experience, and the Maafa and the Holocaust that occurred, and the spilled blood of Abel that is still crying from the ground of our of this territory that we stole. And I'm not going to say we. I'm going to say somebody stole. But we must not be continue to be complicit in the abuse, the mental abuse, and of social programming and the media. We must not be complicit. We have a problem because Black media is not as strong as the popular media. And so the Black voices that we normally would hear, they have been dwindled down throughout the years. There have been buyouts, and people have paid money to make sure that certain voices are not heard on the air. And people have paid money and changed policies and done things to make sure that you don't hear about yourself, or you don't look into a screen and see a good mirror. That there are people who are invested in Black drama. There are people who are invested in Black deprivation. There are people who are invested in inadequacy. Black inadequacy is what fuels their shows. It is what keeps their pockets full. And now we're in a season where where justice is on the front lines, or on the front lines of these headlines, I would say, but in the sense of the local actions and the local decisions, are we still safe? Do we have representation? Representation. Why are we feeling the justice's death? Why are we feeling the transition? Because there's a fear. There is a fear that if this justice falls, that this justice will literally be replaced with a vessel of injustice. And of course, our silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit with injustice. And so I wanted to share with you today, because this is a profoundly prophetic moment. I just got finished talking about economic justice. I just logged off and said goodnight. And can I say, in a theological space, God being on the side of the oppressed God being on the side of the disinherited, God being on the side of those who have been disjointed from the place of their authenticity. It should shape the prophetic fervor that drives you, preacher, pastor, prophet, leader, bishop, whoever you are. We must not be so concerned about ancient assimilation that we miss modern deprivation, because there is a threat to black faith in general. And it's not good enough to wear robes and collars. We must wear justice, and we must work toward justice where there's injustice. Because if we don't do it in the sacred space, then the chances of it being some kind of change in the economic space or in the social space are slim to none. People get their sociological, philosophical, economic directives from their theological persuasions and suggestions. It is what keeps man in balance. The sociological implications of our religious convictions cause us to make economic decisions, social decisions. It causes us to value one type of life over another. It causes us to feel free to kill one kind of people. Do you know that there are some ministers that are teaching right now that that the socialist left need to be killed in the name of God, and that we need another civil war so that there is righteousness. And if that's righteousness, if that form of righteousness to be able to uh, legitimize and theologize murder and theologize uh, uh, wickedness in the name of God, and publicize it and try to normalize it. If that is what they would do, how much more important is it for you, ma'am, sir, to take your platform, your pulpit, your Facebook, your Instagram, your whatever you have, and you don't have to be religious per se, and you don't have to be uh, uppity or elitist or separatist in your rhetoric, but you do have to be sacred, and you do have to mean what you're saying, and you do have to talk to people as if there is value in their life and in their space, and you do have to connect. And if you do those things, if you connect, if you talk as if you have some sensibility, and if you value people and value their experience, value their not only their wealth, but value their dispossession, their challenges, their impoverishments, their wounds. The scripture records that there was a Samaritan, right? And we don't have to go into it, but the value was not with the money. The value was with the lack. The value was with someone who had been robbed. We are going to value those the least, and I can't even call them the least because they're actually the most of us. Let's see how much theology you got by the way you treat the people who don't have what you have. I said, we'll see how much theology you have when we see how you treat the people that don't have what you have. Let's not be elitists in the name of kingdom. Let's not do what other folks do in order to achieve what we believe is the conquering king, the true conquering that needs to go on is a conquering of those spirits that make us wicked or make us twisted, the things that subtract love, the things that subtract justice, the things that subtract mercy, the things that subtract joy, the things that subtract patience, the things that subtract long suffering and longevity. Those things that subtract are the things that we need to be profoundly convinced that we need to conquer. The things that rob us of the value of life. That's what we really need the conquering king to conquer. It is not that we conquer one another, it is that we fully allow who we are authentically in our divinity to encompass and engulf all that we are with love and with a sense of understanding. And we need the therapy areas that we have been trying to throw away. But that's another message for another day. Rest in peace, Justice Ginsburg. I pray that we make it to the next place with the clarity, the profound clarity that is necessary for change to be made. Maybe you won't listen to this broadcast, but maybe my great grandchildren will. Maybe you won't hear what I'm saying today, but maybe somebody will scroll across this video sometime later. Maybe you won't take it seriously, but maybe somebody that needs you will need you to hear it. So don't take the words lightly. Don't take the moment lightly. Prophecy is not just about the theatrics of emotion or the shock and awe of someone knowing the future or being able to assess something that they've never engaged personally. That is not the value of prophecy. The value of prophecy is the co-creational power to reproduce the balance that we were created in. I'm going to say that again. The value of prophecy is the co-creational power to reproduce the balance that we were created in. We read the text, it says, "Let there be light," and the light shined in darkness. The scripture says that there was chaos and darkness upon the face of the deep. Thank you for raising that this week, ITC Fall Convocation, because it reminds me that all things were being called into balance so that everything could flow in a kind of harmony. And so a prophetic responsibility is really to balance where there's imbalance. And that's creative. And that's why I say co-creational. Because with God speaking to, through, in you, as you, working, walking through, to, in, as you begin to create and recreate or recreate the balance that we were authenticated in the image and likeness. So, blessings to you. I hate to be so deep, but I'm in study, and when I'm in a season of study, this little country Virginian, sometimes I use a few words. When they ask me to talk, I think I know how to talk when it's time to talk. And but these are not just words that I say from time to time on Facebook. These are things that I grapple with living out. And I'll never forget that uncle who said, "Son, you're going to have to make a decision. Whether you're just going to live that or live it or preach it. If you decide to preach it and you don't live it, it's going to show up. But if you live it, it'll be a lot easier to preach it or teach it." And so this is the life, you know. And at times I don't feel worthy to engage the awareness that I have. And that is a challenge to my kingness and my I amness. And that is a challenge to all of the self-hatred that I learned through religion and through pedagogies that were not healthy for me, but I'm unlearning and relearning. And I'm in a space where there's a value for self-care and development. So thank you for those of you who have been listening and taking this time with me. I pray that these words continue to be health and strength to you. And beyond just the space of mourning, let us pay attention to the lessons that are unfolding before us in 2020. I'll talk to you soon.